In this video, let's study about ovarian cycle that occurs in female of reproductive age every 28 days. The ovarian cycle is a complex, recurring process that occurs in the ovaries, regulating the release of an egg and preparing the body for pregnancy. You can see the structure of female reproductive organ, the uterus, fallopian tube, and the ovary. Actually, the ovarian cycle begins in the ovary. Before understanding the ovarian cycle, you need to understand few interesting facts about oogenesis. In case of females, oogenesis begins when the female is inside the womb or uterus of her mother. Isn't it shocking for you to know that females are born with a fixed number of eggs, which are formed in the time before their birth? Yes, you heard it right. The reproductive age of every female is determined by the number of primary oocytes they have by the time of their birth. You can see here, all the primary oocytes are formed by month 5 of fetal life. Estimated number of primary oocytes at month 5 is about 7 million. Most of them gets degenerated and count falls to about 2 million at birth. By puberty, only 40,000 primary oocytes are present, out of which 400 to 500 undergo ovulation in the female reproductive life. The reproductive age of female usually ranges from 15 to 49 years. During this period, every female have ongoing ovarian cycle each month. Now let's study about this cycle. Ovarian cycle consists of 3 phases. As you can see here, number 1, follicular phase, ovulatory phase number 2, and luteal phase number 3. Now, at first, let's talk about the follicular phase. By the name follicular phase, it means that a number of follicles undergo maturation during this phase. From the time of birth, there are many primordial follicles under the ovarian capsule. After puberty, 5 to 15 primary follicles begin maturation with each ovarian cycle, but only one reaches the full maturity to undergo ovulation, whereas others degenerate. You can see a number of developing follicles here. Out of this, only one follicle undergo full maturation to form the graffian follicle, whereas the remaining follicles regresses. Follicular development occurs by a number of steps under the influence of follicle-stimulating hormone, which is secreted by the anterior pituitary gland. You can see the given below picture about the ovarian cycle, consisting of 2 phases, follicular phase, luteal phase, and between these phases, the ovulatory phase exists. In the follicular phase, you can see the primordial follicle getting developed into primary follicle. The primary follicle undergo maturation to form the secondary follicle, which finally forms the graffian follicle. This all development of follicles comes under follicular phase. You can see here, the follicular phase is immediately followed by luteal phase, consisting of ovulation on 14th day, corpus luteum and corpus albicans. We will talk in detail about them later in this video. You can see here a number of stages in the development of follicular cells. Here are primary follicle, maturing primary follicle, secondary follicle, maturing secondary follicle, and finally the fully developed graffian follicle. So, what changes occur in the primary follicle that makes it secondary follicle? As you can see here, the primary follicle has primary oocyte inside, which is surrounded by a single layer of columnar follicular cells, and there is a presence of stroma. Whereas, in case of maturing primary follicles, this follicular cell multiplies and a multiple layer of follicular cells are produced. Also, zona pellucida, a glycoprotein coat is developed and the stromal cells are there. In case of secondary follicles, these maturing primary follicles develop a number of small lacunae in the granulosa cells. These are small fluid-filled lacuna or cavities, which is surrounded by the basement membrane. So, in case of maturing secondary follicle, This number of lacunae or cavities coalesce to form the large follicular cavity, which is known as antrum. You can see the cumulus oophorus cells and the oocyte as well as zona pellucida here. Now, let's see about the graffian follicle, which is fully developed follicle. It has outermost coat, theca externa. Inner to the theca externa, there is presence of theca interna. Inner to theca interna, membrane granulosa cells. You can see here the oocyte and the first polar body. There are also presence of cumulus oophorus cells and the discus proligerus cells as well. This is the overall picture by which primary follicle develop into fully developed graffian follicle. This is all about the follicular phase. You can see here the primordial follicles at first develop into early primary follicles, then late primary follicles, which develop into secondary or antral follicle, which finally develop into tertiary or graffian follicle. Now, this graffian follicle is ready to undergo ovulation. Now, let's talk about the second phase, which is ovulatory phase. At about 14th day of the ovarian cycle, LS sorts, that is luteinizing hormone sorts, occurs before 24 to 48 hours of ovulation. This LS sorts is responsible for ovulation as it causes the rupture of the graffian follicles. You can see the rupturing graffian follicle here under the influence of LH hormone, that is luteinizing hormone. The simultaneous development of primary oocytes that were arrested in the fetal life occurs and it forms the matured ovum. As a result of this rupture, the matured ova are released from the graffian follicles. Now let's talk about the luteal phase of the ovarian cycle. After rupture of the graffian follicle, the remaining part of ruptured graffian follicle gets filled with blood, forming the corpus hemorrhagicum. This corpus hemorrhagicum later gets converted into yellowish lipid-rich substance or the body called the corpus luteum. Now, let's know about what happens to the corpus luteum, or what is the fate of the corpus luteum. Two conditions arises, either if the fertilization occurs or if the fertilization does not occur. So, at first, if the fertilization occurs, the corpus luteum becomes the corpus luteum of the pregnancy and secrete the hormone estrogen and the progesterone, facilitating the pregnancy. Whereas, if the fertilization does not occur, the corpus luteum degenerates into corpus albicans, which is a white body that eventually disappears. Now, what happens to oocyte, or what is the fate of oocyte? Here are also two conditions, either if the fertilization occurs or if the fertilization does not occur. So, in case if the fertilization occurs within 18 to 24 hours of ovulation, the oocyte fuses with the sperm or the spermatozoa and the zygote is formed. However, if the fertilization does not occur, the oocyte gets degenerated between 12 to 24 hours after ovulation. Thank you for watching this video. For more informative video like this, please subscribe my channel.